Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about literal equations and formulas, and we're going to be rewriting them. Now, a literal equation might be something new to you. A formula, there's the distance formula and the formula for area and circumference, but a literal equation might be a new word. So let's go ahead and define that in our spiral notebooks. A literal equation is an equation that has two or more variables. So, for example, distance equals rate times time is a literal equation and it has more than two variables. So you could find the distance if you knew the rate and the time, or you could find the rate if you knew the distance and the time, etc. So let's look at our first example. Our first example says you are ordering pizzas and sandwiches. You have a budget of $80. Pizza costs $10 each and sandwiches cost $5 each. How many sandwiches can you buy if you order 3 pizzas, 4 pizzas, or 5 pizzas? So this is actually 3 questions that we're going to have to solve. So we're going to try and make this as easy as possible on ourselves. So if I look here, it says you have a budget of $80. So $80 is what I can spend. And with that, I can buy pizzas, which are $10 each. So that's $10 per pizza. And plus sandwiches, which are $5 each. So $5 per sandwich. So that's my equation for the total cost of my bill when I buy pizzas and sandwiches. I take the number of pizzas and times it by 10 and the number of sandwiches and times it by 5 and add it together. So I want to know how many different ways I could come up with pizzas and sandwiches for $80. Knowing that I want to buy 3 pizzas or 4 pizzas or 5 pizzas. So instead of having to plug in 3 pizzas and solve for S 3 times, I'm going to rewrite this equation. And I'm going to solve it for S because that's really what I'm looking for. I want to know S, how many sandwiches. So S equals what? So really all you're doing is you're rearranging the terms. So I want to get S by itself. So that means I want to get rid of the times 5 and the plus 10p. Just like solving two-step equations, you get rid of the addition and subtraction first. So I'm going to subtract 10p from both sides because remember, I can do anything to this equation as long as I keep it balanced and do it to both sides. Now, 80 minus 10p, those are not like terms, so I can't do anything with them. I just leave it as 80 minus 10p. Now, positive 10p and negative 10p cancel, always check. And then my 5s just kind of drops down and hangs out there. Now, I want to get s by itself, so this is pretty simple. I'm going to divide this by 5, but then I have to divide the entire other side by 5. That means every single term over there gets divided by 5. So that means 80 divided by 5 is going to be 16. And negative 10 divided by 5 is going to be negative 2p. And then 5 divided by 5 is 1, and that gives me s. So now I have this equation. 16 minus 2p equals s. The reason I did that is because now I can quickly simplify in my 3 pizzas. So if I have 3 pizzas, that means I have 16 minus 2 times 3, because that's 3 pizzas, 3p, equals s. So when I order 3 pizzas, I get 16 minus 6 equals s. So s equals 10. So I could have 3 pizzas and 10 sandwiches. I could also plug in 4 pizzas. So now I have 16 minus 2 times 4, because that's 4 pizzas, equals s. And 16, 2 times 4 is negative 8, equals s. So 8 sandwiches if I order 4 pizzas. And then I have 5 pizzas, so I'm going to plug that in for p over here. And I get 16 minus 2 times 5 equals 5, or I'm sorry, equals s. and then 16 minus 2 times 5 is 10 equals S. So 6 equals S. So if I buy 3 pizzas, I get 10 sandwiches, 4 pizzas, 8 sandwiches, and 5 pizzas, 6 sandwiches. So it's a little easier than having to go back and plug it in and solve every single time. So let's practice one. Here's your equation, 4 equals 2m minus 5n, and you want to solve it for m so that you can see what does m equal when n is negative 2, 0, and 2. So go ahead and pause the video, and then when it's paused, complete it, and then come back and see if you did it correctly. Okay, at this point you should have finished solving for m and plugging in, and now you're just checking your work. So I have 4 equals 2m minus 5n, and I'm going to solve for n. So therefore, I'm going to get rid of anything that's not an I'm going to get rid of anything that's not an m. So instead of 5n minus 5n, I'm going to add 5n to both sides. Now, 4 plus 5n, I can't do anything to that. I'm going to move it over here so I have some room. So that stays, equals my 2m stays there, and then negative 5n and 5n cancel. Now I'm going to divide everything by 2 to get m by itself, both sides. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 5 divided by 2 is 5 halves, or 2.5, n equals, and those cancel, I get m. Now don't let the fraction freak you out at all. They made it really easy by plugging in multiples of 2. So this is my new equation. I can easily solve for m by plugging in these values for n. So the first one I'm going to plug in is negative 2. So I have 2 plus 5 halves. Instead of n, I'm going to put negative 2 in there, equals m. Now all you have to do is do your order of operations. This becomes 2 over 1. You get 2 plus, this is negative 10 over 2, equals m. And 2 plus negative 10 over 2 is negative 5, equals m. So negative 3 equals m. So that's one of them. So we'll start a list over here. M equals, when it's negative 2, you get negative 3. Now let's plug 0 into the same equation. So we're just plugging it in over here. 2 plus 5 halves 0 equals m. We know anything times 0 is 0, so that becomes 0, and 2 plus 0 is 2, so m equals 2. So our next one, when n is 0, n is 2. And then last but not least, we're going to plug in positive 2. So we have 2 plus 5 halves times positive 2 equals m. This becomes 2 plus, that's 2 over 1, 10 halves equals m, which gives us 2 plus 10 over 2 is 5 equals m. So our last one is m is 7. That's our answer. Okay, so now let's take what we've learned from literal equations and talk about what is the radius of a circle with the circumference of 64 feet round to the nearest tenth. So this helps us if we have parts of a equation and we have the equation c equals 2 pi r is the equation for circumference, but now they actually gave us the circumference. We're not looking for it. So one way I can do it is I could just plug in 64 for my circumference, and then I could solve for the radius. Another way of doing it is if I'm looking for what is the radius, I can solve this equation for r. And once you see how to do this, you'll get really good at it, and it'll be so much easier. So I'm going to get rid of anything that's being added or subtracted to r, which in this equation is nothing. So then I have to undo any multiplication or division. And if you look at this, you will see that r is being actually multiplied by 2 pi. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi. So then I'm left with c over 2 pi equals, your 2's cancel, your pi's cancel, equals r. Now I can very quickly solve this by plugging 64 in for c, and I get 64 over 2 times, and pi is 3.14, equals the radius, and I can plug that in the calculator very quickly and get my radius equals 10.2 feet. And if you had a lot of calculations where you were trying to find the radius of a lot of circles, it would be much easier to solve the equation for r than it would be to plug it in and constantly do the math. Here's another example. The monarch butterfly is the only butterfly that migrates annually north and south. One particular monarch butterfly travels 1,700 miles from Indiana to Mexico in about 120 days. What is the average rate, so that should think in your head, you should think fraction, at which a butterfly travels in miles per day? So anytime you're talking about traveling, time, distance, rate, that's the distance formula, which is d equals rt. Distance equals rate times time. So we're looking at what is the average rate. So we want to know what is the rate. So we want to solve this for rate, for r. So we look at it and we say, well, there's nothing being added to it or subtracted, but r is being multiplied by t. So we're going to undo that operation and we're going to divide by t. We're doing the opposite or the inverse. So now I have d over t equals, your t's cancel, r. Now how quickly can I plug in the rate, and I want a fraction, which I already have, distance over time. If I have 1,700 miles in 120 days, that equals the rate that the butterfly is traveling, which is approximately 14 miles in 1 day. That's pretty far for a little butterfly. Okay, I want you to try this one. So pause the video and then when you're done, come back and see if it's correct. So hopefully you completed this problem and now you're just checking it. The Pacific gray whales migrate annually from the waters near Alaska to the waters near Baja California, Mexico, and back. The whales travel a distance of 5,000 miles each way at an average rate of 91 miles per day. How many days, so that's a time measurement, does it take the whales to migrate one way? So distance, again, we're talking distance equals rate times time. But this time we're solving for time. So we wanted to say time equals. So we need to get rid of anything that is not time. So we're going to divide both sides by the rate. Those cancel, and I get distance over rate equals time. So my distance is 5,000 miles over 91 days. Now you want to keep track, when you do this, you want to keep track of your units so that you have the correct units at the end. So then if you take 5,000 and divide it by 91, it comes out to your time being approximately 54.9 miles in 1 day.